In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at this iPhone 5S. And if you're wondering why the video and the audio sounds as old as this device, that's because we're using another iPhone 5S to record today's video. Now, if you have all of this hardware and you can't use it, then what's the point in having it? So I figured we'd make today's video a little bit different by using 5S technology to fix an iPhone 5S, while also using another iPhone 5S to get the parts that we need. This particular 5S is pretty special because, firstly, it doesn't have any sort of iCloud account linked to this, so this is able to be used as a normal iPhone without iCloud activation lock. Secondly, this is on iOS 9.2, so we have that classic slide to unlock. This has only had 2 major iOS updates in its lifetime because the iPhone 5S initially came with iOS 7 and it supports all the way up to iOS 12. And there is no way I'm going to be updating this to iOS 12 because then you'd lose the entire point of having an older iOS version. And the last thing that is really nice about this specific model is that this is a 64GB unit. So this is actually really useful even today. Now, if you're interested in seeing where I actually got this 5S, I actually unboxed this where I got it from an eBay listing, and I'll have the video linked up here if you're interested in checking that out. But this is another 5S that I've also gotten from another listing, and this has its own problems. It clearly has had some work done in the past. The display itself does work. We do have another battery as well if we do need it, but because this one actually works, I'm not going to replace it in today's video. It seems like this is a replacement LCD because, well, there's a piece of plastic that hasn't been removed. It doesn't exactly look like the factory original. If you take a closer look at the original display on this specific 5S, the screen appears to be darker in color, so it seems like it's all one piece instead of it being more of a obvious display like it is on this one. I will transfer over the home button because we want to retain Touch ID functionality. We won't be getting rid of this display because this is still good to test out other 5S's. I'm going to get my iFixit toolkit and we will try to open up this phone without the display falling into a million pieces. So the first step right now is to turn off the 5S. And I've also got the lid here from the driver bits to use to put the screws from the 5S. And next up, we have to figure out how to remove this display without it falling into a million pieces, because we can't exactly use the normal suction cup to attach it onto the display. It obviously just won't work. So I found a good spot around the mute switch and the volume controls to actually put a jimmy tool and try to pry up the display, but I soon realized that if I continue with this, glass pieces are going to start falling out, so I went ahead and put some tape over the display to at least keep those glass pieces in place so that way it doesn't disintegrate everywhere. The tape did a good job because I was able to pry up the display just enough to get the plastic pick in between the screen and the housing, and none of the glass pieces fell out. And eventually, with enough time and just being careful not to apply too much pressure, I was able to get the plastic pick all around the actual housing, and the screen was able to be detached. By the way, I am actually using a 5S for these voiceover bits as well, so that way we stay in line with the main theme of today's video. That actually went pretty smoothly, so of course with the 5S, the Touch ID button has to be detached, at least the ribbon cable right there, so we'll have to go ahead and remove that so that way we can actually open up the display, otherwise we will risk damaging it, and we do not want to do that because of course Touch ID is paired with the device itself, at least the motherboard. And here is our 5S. So it looks like this one hasn't been opened up. That's nice to see because, well, it looks very clean inside. The next thing we have to do is, of course, detach the battery first. That would be the first thing I would do if it wasn't for the Touch ID cable. There's only 2 screws that's keeping the actual bracket connected to the motherboard. So once those 2 screws are gone, we can then remove the bracket and then disconnect the battery from the rest of the phone. It's a similar situation for the LCD bracket. There's only 4 screws holding that down, and once those are gone, we can then detach the entire LCD from the device, and we're free to work on it without having to worry about the display. And now the LCD just detaches. Now, since we have the phone in this state, I'm going to go ahead and plug in the new display just to make sure it actually works without screwing in any of the brackets, because if it's not functional, then what's the point in replacing it? So let's go ahead and make sure it actually works, and then we'll go ahead and continue with the actual reassembly. So I don't think the replacement display is the problem here. I think something else may have gone during the disassembly process, which I don't understand what went wrong considering I've replaced iPhone displays in the past. Even though I haven't done a 5S before, it's basically the same as a 5 and a 5C, but unfortunately this is basically the last time this 5S will function normally, at least for now, because you'll see later on that something is happening with this 5S. We have the battery hooked up, and the battery does still have charge, so let's go ahead and power up the device to make sure it's still working. So that's a good sign. Our display is functional, and of course we'll definitely have a Touch ID is not available error message because obviously the Touch ID button hasn't been replaced yet, but if everything checks out, then we'll go ahead and do that next before finally reinstalling it. So as I'm editing this video, I'm having to watch this footage back, and I now know what happened, but at the time, I was so confused as to what was actually happening because all I did was swap out the screen, and it started having different issues because as you can see, the display turned off. I tried to power it on, it just didn't power on. Looks like the battery just ran out of power, so let's go ahead and plug this in. And I wish that was true because, well, I mean, I plugged it in, I tried several chargers, but nothing seemed to fix it. I did actually get it to power on again, but that's only because the battery inside still had a remaining charge, and it's not because of the charger. And I thought it was the display at first, so I went ahead and swapped out the original one. And, well, more bad news, that one now is broken, and honestly, it's not that big of a deal because it was cracked in the first place, and that's why I was changing it out, but at the same time, it was an official display, but if the phone actually functioned, that would be more important. I'm not recording with the 5S because things have taken a drastic U-turn. Now I don't even have a functioning 5S here. This doesn't want to charge. I tried it with the other battery that came with the other 5S. The display does work, and there is still a little bit of charge left in this battery, but this is all I get now. It's telling me to charge, so I get a cable, I plug it in, and there's nothing. It does turn on. This happens occasionally. It powers on, and afterwards it won't do anything. And the only reason why it's turning on is because the battery still has a charge. I can still access it, and then in a moment it's going to turn off. There, it shut off. Power cable is not the problem. Here is a functioning 5S. It charges right up. This is the one I was using to record the video because I thought it would be interesting and fun and just a little bit different because it would be a simple screen replacement. But now I don't have a functioning 5S. Apparently, the issue is something that requires microsoldering. So I did some research on this, and apparently it's something to do with how the charger port communicates with the battery as well as with the motherboard, and something seems to have happened. Now, at the end here, I had a lot of rambling, basically along the lines of, oh no, how could this happen? My iOS 9 5S is gone. You know, that casual sort of disappointment. But basically, instead of saying all of that, let me just say that the reason why I looked into this a little bit more, it seems like this is referred to as a gas gauge or a gas gauge issue in which the battery communicates how much charge it has to the motherboard and if it'll allow it to actually take a charge. Like I said earlier, it requires microsoldering to fix. Now, I don't have any sort of equipment to deal with any of that. I don't even know how I'm going to be able to fix this. I don't think a replacement part can be added to this 5S to fix it, but I haven't lost hope for this 5S. Obviously, there's nothing I can really do for it right now, but I am going to hold on to this in case someday in the future I either do have the equipment or I at least have some sort of capacity to try and fix something like this. But that's basically gonna cut it for this video because I mean, like I said, a simple screen replacement turned into this. I have other 5Ss, but this one was one of the nicer ones I have. I guess I can use this as another excuse to get another 5S or several more 5S models. But unfortunately, yeah, that's going to be it for this specific one. Like I said, unfortunate, but I mean, there's really nothing I can do right now. And hopefully someday we can also get this up and running like it was right before it didn't. But that's going to wrap up today's video. If you enjoyed seeing these failures, and I guess we didn't really have any success with this apart from the fact that we know that replacement LCD works. I mean, it's not even an official Apple one, so it's not that big of a deal. If you enjoyed it, then consider leaving a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content like this, I mean, hopefully this doesn't happen again. If you want to see stuff actually being repaired without it breaking, then consider subscribing, because who knows what'll pop up on the channel next time. But that's going to be it for now, and as always, thank you very much for watching.